And today I'll be ending my Easter sermon series that I've been doing for the past few weeks. Today, the last part will be the topic resurrection in a world of danger. And we'll be looking especially at our Acts and Gospel readings today. After those readings, it's going to look like the curtain comes down too soon on them. They're going to end and you're going to be kind of like, wait, that's the end? Why are we ending there? And we'll get into that. And in my exploration of resurrection in a dangerous world, I'm not going to be so much taking on what makes the world dangerous, but I want to look at a particular process that we see time and time again that perpetuates that feeling of danger that we often experience. So, you have that to look forward to. Well, for those who are interested in this sort of thing, last year, the Oxford Dictionary had a word of the year. Does anyone know what it was, by any chance? It was bad. It was. Rage bait was the 2025 word of the year. And right away, you could almost hear people clicking away. That's 2 words, not 1 word. And yes, that's right. But rage bait became kind of popular in the online ecosystem. That's where it really came about. And there's a lot of reasons for rage baiting. People do it on social media accounts to get increased traffic, right? More clicks. Or to get engagement, get reposts, get comments, get people to notice. Even revenue streams as well. People do it for revenue. Anyone know who that is? That came out a couple weeks ago. A woman named Emily Hart, except that image is entirely AI generated. This guy in India had used AI to create this MAGA influence person named Emily Hart. And he wanted her to be young. He fed AI some prompts, wanted her to be kind of very conservative, nationalist, and kind of put in a few prompts. She started posting and generating these reels. He had tens of thousands of followers, millions of reposts and engagement, and he just watched that money come in from this whole rage bait persona before Instagram shut it down. And we might think that we're above rage baiting. Either we don't fall for it or we just ignore it. But regardless of our personal relationship to it, it's worth exploring why rage baiting is so effective and so profitable. And part of the reason is it fits so well into this bigger process, which I'll get to in a little bit later today. The other reason why it's so effective is it's so ingrained in us to want to identify threats, right, in our environment, to be aware of those threats and to then act, to either persevere, save our own self or those close to us. We want to know what those threats are. And even if we don't live in a state of constant fear, we know that in this world we can find plenty of things to be afraid of. And when we believe the world is a dangerous place, well, then we look for guidance through that place, right? Through that world. And religion really operates in a similar way. It provides guidance for people. That's what they're looking for. And religion, when it's healthy, challenges us. But we do know that religion has also been used to stoke fear. Last week, I covered kind of the resurrection and the freedom from fear. And I kind of dealt mostly with what it meant to have a fear of God. But this week, I want to look at navigating that world of danger. I mentioned that they would dovetail last week and this week, and here's kind of where it is. So, you heard earlier in the reading the ending of Mark's gospel. Mark's gospel has the strangest ending of all of them. If you were to look in your Bibles, you would see probably most Bibles have a couple different longer endings that they believe were added much later in later documents. But the earliest documents of Mark's gospel have the ending where they just go away in fear and don't tell anyone. Just as the women are wondering, hey, who's going to roll this stone away so they could anoint Jesus' body? They find a man there who tells them, yep, Jesus isn't here. Yes, he was crucified, but he's risen, and he's going to meet you later. So their reaction, of course, is one of fear, right? So they went and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement seized them. They said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. In Mark's ending here, fear is pretty open-ended. There's room for wonder, for imagination, and we learn, of course, that we wouldn't have the rest of the New Testament, we wouldn't have the rest of the Christian story had they continued to not tell anyone, right? We know that they did not let fear get in their way. They had a willingness to trust that God was doing something new, something bigger than they could imagine. But their fear could also have led them into something else. And that's kind of the process that I was getting to that I want to look at today. How fear is weaponized. I'm going to look at 3 general steps. This is kind of my summary. It's not scientific at all. This is just my observations from reading things, looking at things. There's not so much steps as more features of this movement of weaponized fear. There you see there an image of St. Stephen. He's often depicted with stones, and we know why, right? We're first introduced to Stephen a chapter earlier in Acts, and we're told that he's full of grace and power, that he did wonders and signs, and this is kind of the first of a few similarities to Jesus' story, that connection between Jesus and Stephen. But there's a conflict right away. We know that some could not withstand the spirit with which he spoke. So they set up false witnesses. Again, another similarity to Jesus' story. And that goes to step 1 in weaponizing fear, narrowing the narrative. Despite all that Stephen had said, all that he did, his accusers came up with this, right? We have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and will change the customs that Moses handed on to us. Right? So this narrative of what all of what Jesus is talking about, this narrative is getting real narrow, real fast. And we saw that with Jesus as well. After Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, we're told that some of those witnesses who saw him raise Lazarus from the dead go to the religious leaders. And they tell them, hey, here's what Jesus did. What are we going to do? And those religious leaders meet together and they conclude this. This man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And the Romans will come and destroy both our holy place and our nation. When the narrative narrows down, it's important to recognize what is being sidelined, right? Who is being sacrificed? Who is being left out? Here's where we need our critical thinkers. The doubters, right? We need the ones who pump the brakes, who survey the landscape. Say, wait a minute, what's going on here? There's a little element of truth in this too, and that's what makes it complicated. And that's the next step that we get to here, creating the urgency. This urgency stems from that narrowed narrative. People feel in the air that, hey, things aren't right. Things could be better. Who can we blame? And the urgency is effective because the one who narrows the narrative also claims to have the solution. Listen to me. I'll lead you out. I'll lead you to the truth. We know how to solve this. Well, the religious leaders, when they worried that Jesus' popularity would attract the wrong kind of attention from Rome, Caiaphas was the one who then spoke up. You don't understand that it is better for you to have one man die for the people than to have the whole nation destroyed. So Caiaphas has already come up with the solution, and he kind of puts that seed of urgency, builds on their fear, right? Builds on that narrow narrative. He's saying, look, here's the answer. And here's an important thing to point out. It's a mistake to think that reason and facts will win. Because we know that the ones who weaponize fear dismiss facts as fake news. And the urgency gains traction because the narrow narrative contains that bit of truth, but ultimately that narrative doesn't need to make sense. It just needs to provide an answer. It needs to provide a quick solution. So what should we do in a time like this? Well, we need to interrogate the ethical position of those who are employing that narrow narrative, those who are providing that urgency. And we don't need a big platform to do this. We don't need to post on Facebook or social media. We just need to be aware of our conversations, aware of our own reflecting and thinking. Ask ourselves, what kind of world are they building? What does that world cost? At whose expense does that world come into being? Things move quickly because the last step that I want to cover for this weaponization of fear is mobilizing the rage. This is the apex of weaponized fear. We know that fear can be mobilized into violence. The crucifixion, the stoning of Stephen, lynchings, the January 6th attack on the Capitol. We can draw these lines throughout history. It's the same old story, same process. The problem is the weaponization of fear is so difficult to counter, and that's why it continues to be used. It's so effective. So as people of faith, I think it's so valuable a calling for us to realize that we need to find a deeper purpose than uniting in anger. I want to go back to that Easter morning, to that fear of those first disciples. Because what they didn't do is they didn't let fear capture their imaginations. They didn't stay in that fear, that initial fear they had. Instead, they trusted that the story of the empty tomb was bigger than their fear. And here's where we find this powerful invitation in the resurrection of Jesus. Because the resurrection always exposes how that machine of weaponized fear works. Because resurrection is the commitment to life over chaos and coercive power. Belief is different than faith. See, it's one thing to believe that the world is a dangerous place, but we still look for guidance through that world. Faith, that's about who and what we trust in the midst of it. And in the resurrection, we find God inviting us to trust beyond what this world tells us to fear. Here's peace, and here's the way out. Amen.